Okay, the Pythagorean theorem is part of trigonometry. We're going to do a really quick review. I know everyone has a really good handle on the Pythagorean theorem, but we'll just work some examples, make it a really short video lecture, and then we'll do some practice in class. So if we have a right triangle, the Pythagorean theorem only works if you're in a right triangle. If A and B are the measures of the legs and C is the hypotenuse, then the Pythagorean says this equation is always true. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A and B, remember, are the legs. They're the adjacent and opposite side. And C is the hypotenuse, which is the longest side of the triangle, the side across from the right angle. So let's work a few examples. So here, we want to find the length of the hypotenuse. We know we have one leg that's 16 inches, one leg that's 12 inches. So the Pythagorean theorem says that has to be 12 squared plus 16 squared, and that equals, we'll call it h for the hypotenuse, h squared. So I don't know that we need to take the time to do all the math. Therefore, h has to be plus or minus the square root of that sum. I mean, we can all get our calculators out, figure out what that is. The one thing that I want to point out is that this is always going to be the positive square root of that sum, because the Pythagorean theorem, by definition, is finding a measure. It's finding a length of one side of that right triangle. And measure, or length, is always positive. So even though mathematically we would have to worry about plus or minus, in this context, we don't have to worry about it. So here's another one. Find the length of the hypotenuse, given that the legs of a right triangle are 6 foot and 12 foot. 6 squared plus 12 squared has to equal the hypotenuse squared. Since we're talking about measure, we're going to talk about the positive root of that sum. And that's it. Now, we've done a lot of practice on simplifying under a square root. So if you have any homework problems, quiz problems, test questions, where you don't have your calculator, you still should be able to simplify that. Here's another one where we know the measure of a leg and the measure of the hypotenuse, but not the measure of the other leg. So we could call this, since it's a horizontal measure, we could call it x. So x squared plus 4 squared would have to equal 10 squared, or x squared has to equal 10 squared minus 4 squared. And x, in this context, since it's a measure, it's going to have to be positive square root of 10 squared minus 4 squared. So Pythagorean theorem, something you're really comfortable with, not an issue. This is a vertical distance, we'll call it y. Y squared plus 12 squared has to equal 13 squared. Y squared is 13 squared minus 12 squared. Y is the positive square root of 13 squared minus 12 squared. And that's it. We know how to work our way around the Pythagorean theorem. We will cover it more when we get into word problems that involve trigonometry. So that's it for this video lecture. Come to class next time and we'll work some homework problems on the Pythagorean theorem.